A man
I
stood
have
in
waited an
Rosalind
eternity
Mercer's
for this
garden at
moment.
dawn,
And
uninvited,
I have
as if
always been
appearing in
yours.
strangers' gardens was the most natural thing in the world. She saw him from her bedroom window, recognized him instantly. Everyone in London would. Dorian Ashcroft, the most admired man in certain circles, the wealthiest, the most mysterious, and according to 12 rejected women, the most impossible. Rosalind was 23 years old, and she had run out of options 3 weeks ago. When she looked at herself in the mirror that January morning, what she saw did not make her sad. There was no time left for sadness. Brown hair that refused fashionable curls. Gray eyes her mother once called thoughtful. Not beautiful, not in the way London society measured such things. Interesting, perhaps. And everyone knew what happened to interesting girls in a world that preferred beautiful ones. They were forgotten. Her reflection showed a face that had learned to smile at the right moments, to nod at the right words, to present contentment, while her father's world crumbled. 3 years of slow collapse. 3 years of watching furniture disappear piece by piece, servants dismissed one by one, invitations growing fewer until they stopped altogether. The Mercer family had once meant something. Now it meant debts. Rosalind fastened the buttons of her gray dress. Good quality fabric, but last season's cut. Everything in her wardrobe told the same story. Genteel poverty wrapped in fading respectability. Outside January held London in its grip. Bare trees, gray sky, the kind of day that felt like an ending. She walked to the window and looked down. The man stood near the gate where her father had planted roses years ago. They had bloomed once brilliant red, then withered. No one had tended them since. Dorian Ashcroft wore London's finest tailoring, his posture impossibly straight, his face unreadable. Dark hair swept back from features that might have been carved from marble, eyes that caught the morning light and turned it into something else. Rosalind counted her options the way she counted the coins left in the household account. Marriage, marriage, marriage. Every calculation led to the same answer. She would need to marry someone, soon, before the creditors came for the house itself. The problem was simple. Men who could afford to save her family did not need desperate girls with nothing to offer. Men who might want to marry her could not afford the debts. A paradox with no solution. Until now. Rosalind did not call for her father, did not wonder at the impropriety. She simply walked downstairs through the house and out into the garden. The cold hit her like a slap. She had not stopped for a coat. He watched her approach with eyes that missed nothing. As she came closer, she realized he cast no breath in the cold air. No mist from his lips. Just stillness. "Mr. Ashcroft," she said. Her voice came out steady. "Good. You must have a compelling reason for trespassing." The corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile. "Miss Mercer, there is someone I need to speak with. That someone is you. Then you should have sent a card. Would you have received me?" She considered lying, decided against it. "No." "Precisely." He inclined his head. "I apologize for the intrusion, but time is short and I have a proposition that requires privacy. Propositions delivered in gardens at dawn are rarely respectable. This one is not respectable at all." Now he did smile. It did not reach his eyes. "But it is honest, and it may be the only thing standing between your family and ruin." The words landed like stones in still water. Rosalind felt the ripples spread through her chest. He knew. Of course he knew. "Come inside," she said. Her father's study smelled of old books and older desperation. Papers covered the desk in organized chaos. Accounting ledgers, bills, letters from creditors. The mathematics of collapse laid out in neat columns. Bernard Mercer sat behind the desk, looking like a man who had aged 20 years in three. His hair had gone white at the temples. His hands shook slightly as he straightened papers, trying to restore dignity to disorder. Dorian Ashcroft stood in the center of the room and explained his offer in 3 sentences. "I require a wife, not a conventional marriage. 1 year. At the end of that year, we will part ways quietly and your family's debts will be erased." Bernard started to speak. Rosalind raised her hand. "One moment, please." She turned to face Dorian directly. He stood there perfectly still, waiting. No fidgeting, no nervous energy, just that quality of ancient patience. "Why?" she asked. "There are people who wish to destroy me. They possess certain leverage. The image of a married, settled man will render that leverage useless. 1 year will be sufficient." "That does not answer my question." "Why me?" He regarded her for a long moment. "Because you are intelligent enough to understand what I am offering, practical enough to see the value, and desperate enough to accept." The brutal honesty took her breath away. Most men would have dressed it up in prettier words. What exactly would this arrangement entail? You would live at my estate, appear with me at necessary social functions, present the image of a wife. Beyond that, I will not interfere with your life. Separate rooms. Of course. Her father made a sound. Rosalind ignored it. And after the year, a quiet separation, no scandal, you will have sufficient funds to live comfortably. Your family's creditors will be paid in full. He paused. You will be free. Free. The word hung in the air like a promise and a lie. I have conditions, Rosalind said. Dorian's expression did not change. Speak them. First, my family will not know the true nature of this arrangement. They will believe it is a real marriage. I will carry that deception alone. Agreed. Second, I will have my own space in your home. No one enters without permission. No one questions how I spend my time. Agreed. Third, she paused, gathering courage. The money you provide for my family must be enough, not just to pay debts, but to secure their future. Real security, not charity that runs out in 5 years. Agreed. The speed of his acceptance troubled her. No negotiation, no hesitation. Why are you making this so easy? She said. For the first time, something flickered in those dark eyes. Because I need you more than you need me. It was the most honest thing anyone had ever said to her. There is one more thing, Dorian said. One condition that I require. Here it was, the trap. What condition? He held her gaze. Once each month, when the moon is full, I will require a small amount of your blood. Willingly given. Enough to seal an oath between us. The room went very quiet. Her father made a choking sound. Rosalind felt the world tilt. Blood. He wanted her blood. Why? The word came out barely above a whisper. Because in my world, a blood oath is the only contract that matters. It will bind us together for the year. Prove that our marriage is real, not convenience. When the year ends, the bond ends. What kind of bond? A connection. You will be able to sense my presence, my emotions. It is not painful, but it is permanent. Even after the year, the intensity fades, but yes, some echo will remain. Rosalind looked at her father. The old man sat with tears in his eyes, guilt and hope and shame mixed together. She looked at the bills on the desk. She looked at her own hands worn from work servants used to handle. Then she looked at Dorian Ashcroft, this strange, beautiful, terrifying man, offering salvation with a price. How much blood? She asked. Very little. A few drops from your wrist. Once a month. And if I refuse this condition, then I will find someone else. His voice remained level. 12 women have already refused. You would be the 13th. 13. An unlucky number, or perhaps lucky depending on perspective. Why would 12 women refuse? Because the blood oath frightens them. Because they do not wish to be bound to someone like me. Because they have other options. He tilted his head slightly. You do not have other options, Miss Mercer. The cruelty of it was breathtaking, and completely true. Rosalind walked to the window. Outside, the dead garden waited. Beyond the wall, London continued its indifferent existence. Somewhere in this city, creditors prepared their claims. Somewhere, her mother tried to maintain dignity with no money and no hope. Somewhere, time ran out. She turned back to face him. I accept your terms, she said, all of them. The wedding happened 3 weeks later. 3 weeks for her mother to weep with joy, for her father to walk around looking relieved and guilty, for London society to buzz with speculation about how Rosalind Mercer had caught the most elusive bachelor in England. No one knew the truth. No one could know. Rosalind spent those 3 weeks learning to lie, to smile when her mother talked about grandchildren, to nod when friends offered congratulations, to pretend she felt something other than cold calculation. The wedding dress cost more than her family had spent on anything in 3 years. White silk, perfect fit, beautiful in the way money makes things beautiful. A fiction dressed in silk. The church was not small. Dorian Ashcroft's wedding could not be small. When Rosalind took her father's arm and walked through the doors, she saw hundreds of faces. Some familiar from society pages, most completely unknown. They all turned to watch. Lucky girl. If only they knew. Dorian stood at the altar in black, his posture military straight, his face showing nothing. As Rosalind walked toward him, he did not move, did not smile. He simply waited as if his entire existence consisted of waiting, and he had grown accustomed to it. When she reached him, he spoke in a voice too low for anyone else to hear. Are you ready? Not romantic, not kind, just honest. Yes, Rosalind said. The ceremony lasted 47 minutes. Rosalind said yes at the required moment, bowed at the required moment, smiled at the required moment. Dorian performed his role with precise control, never too much emotion, never too little. When the priest told him to place the ring on her finger, Dorian took her hand. His skin was cool, not cold but cooler than a human hand should be. He slid the ring onto her finger, a band of silver set with a stone that looked like captured night. Then he produced a second box from his coat. Inside lay a pair of gloves, red silk exquisitely made. "A gift," he said quietly, "for my bride." The guests applauded. Rosalind stared at the gloves, red like blood, red like a warning. The wedding breakfast lasted hours. Rosalind sat at one end of the long table, Dorian at the other. Between them, London society ate and drank and gossiped. From time to time, their eyes met across the distance. Each time they smiled at each other. Each time Dorian's smile died the instant he looked away. Near the end, an older woman approached. Lady Pemberton, known for her sharp tongue and sharper mind. "You make a lovely couple, dear. How did Mr. Ashcroft find you?" Rosalind did not hesitate. "He didn't find me, I found him." Lady Pemberton laughed, delighted. "Clever girl." She swept away. Rosalind looked across the table. Dorian had heard the exchange. She could tell because his hand paused halfway to his wineglass. The smallest hesitation. Their eyes met. Something passed between them. Not quite understanding, just a flicker of recognition that they were both playing the same game, following the same script, pretending for an audience that would never know the truth. They arrived at Ashcroft Manor after dark. The carriage rolled up a long gravel drive, and Rosalind saw lights first. Yellow, dim, almost warm from a distance. Then the building emerged from darkness, and something cold moved through her chest. The manor was enormous. 3 stories of gray stone ivy covering most of the facade windows like dark eyes. A tower rose on the right wing. Half the windows showed no light at all. This was not a home. This was something that had watched centuries pass and remained unchanged. Servants waited at the entrance. 6 of them dressed in black, their faces professionally neutral. At the front stood a woman in her 60s, gray hair pulled back severely, her expression unreadable. "Mrs. Sybil," Dorian said, "my housekeeper." Mrs. Sybil curtsied. "Welcome, Mrs. Ashcroft." Mrs. Ashcroft. The name felt foreign, wrong. "Thank you," Rosalind managed. The interior matched the exterior. Dark wood paneling, high ceilings lost in shadow, portraits of stern faces watching from walls, furniture that looked expensive and uncomfortable. Every surface gleamed with polish, but somehow the whole place felt abandoned. Mrs. Sybil led her up a wide staircase down a corridor that seemed to stretch into darkness to a door at the very end. "Your room, madam." The room was large. A 4-poster bed dominated the center. A fireplace held a small fire. Near the window stood a writing desk, and beside it, shelves lined with books. "His lordship's room is at the other end of the corridor," Mrs. Sybil said. "I can have breakfast brought to your room in the morning if you prefer." "No," Rosalind said. "I'll come downstairs." Mrs. Sybil's expression did not change, but something flickered in her eyes. "As you wish, madam." She left. The door closed. Rosalind stood in the center of the room, listening to silence. No sounds from the rest of the house. No servants moving. No voices. Just the crackle of fire, and somewhere far away, wind through bare trees. She walked to the desk and sat. The red silk gloves lay in their box. She picked them up, feeling the weight of the silk. A gift from a stranger who was now her husband. A man who wanted her blood once a month. A man whose eyes held secrets that might swallow her whole. She was still sitting there when she heard the knock. Soft, almost apologetic. "Come in," she said. Dorian stepped inside. He had removed his coat, stood now in shirt sleeves and waistcoat, looking more human than he had all day. Almost. "I wanted to ensure you have everything you need," he said. "I have a room, a bed, books. What more could I need?" He did not smile at the attempt at humor. "The arrangement we discussed, the contract, will be drawn up tomorrow. My lawyer will bring it for your signature." "All right." A pause. He did not leave. "There is a rule in this house," Dorian said. "After midnight, no one is permitted in the East Wing. The library and other public rooms remain accessible, but the East Wing is forbidden." Rosalind raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "That is a question." "Yes." "Our agreement included no questions." She stared at him. He was right. She had agreed to no questions, no feelings, just a year of pretending. But standing here in this strange room, Rosalind found she could not simply accept a rule without reason. "You've set a rule," she said carefully. "A rule requires a reasonable explanation." Dorian's jaw tightened, the first crack in his perfect control. I work there. I do not wish to be disturbed. At midnight, I keep unusual hours. Because you're a vampire. The words fell into silence like stones into a well. Rosalind had not meant to say them, had not meant to voice the suspicion that had grown over 3 weeks. The way he only appeared at night, the coldness of his skin, the absence of breath in winter air. The 12 women who refused his blood oath, all the pieces that made a picture she did not want to see. Dorian went completely still. Not the stillness of a person trying not to move, the stillness of something that had stopped pretending to be human. Yes, he said finally, one word, simple, devastating. I am a vampire, the king of the Northern Territories to be precise. I have lived for 312 years. I do not kill to feed. I do not turn humans against their will. I do not pose danger to you or your family. But yes, I am a vampire. Rosalind felt the room tilt. She gripped the desk edge. The blood oath, she whispered. You want my blood because it is how my kind seals contracts, because it will bind us together in a way that cannot be broken or faked. Because when my enemies come, and they will come, I need to prove this marriage is real. Who are your enemies? Other vampires, old rivals, new threats, a lord named Cassian Vale who seeks my position and has patience to wait decades for the perfect moment to strike. He took a step closer. I should have told you before the wedding. I know that. But would you have agreed if you knew? Would she have? Rosalind tried to imagine herself 3 weeks ago, desperate and afraid hearing salvation came from a vampire. She did not know. The year, she said. After the year when we part ways, the blood bond. Does it end? The intensity fades, but you will always carry a piece of me. I will always know where you are, how you feel. It is not painful, but it is permanent. Permanent. The thing that made 12 other women refuse. Can it kill me? Rosalind asked. The way it killed. She stopped, but Dorian understood. My first wife, he said quietly. Marguerite, you saw the books in the library. Those were hers. Did the blood bond kill her? No. His voice carried absolute certainty. Marguerite died of an illness 7 years ago. The bond had nothing to do with it. But the other women who refused, they thought it might. Yes, they believed the stories, the myths, that vampires drain their human companions slowly. That the bond is a kind of feeding. He met her eyes. It is not. I swear to you, Rosalind. The bond will not harm you, not physically. Not physically, but the way he said it suggested other kinds of harm. You should have told me, Rosalind said. I know. I might have said no. I know. I might still say no. I know. He turned toward the door, then stopped. If you wish to leave, the carriage will take you back to London tomorrow. Your family's debts will still be paid. I will not hold you to an agreement made under false pretenses. He was giving her an escape, an out. Rosalind thought about London, her mother's tears of joy, her father's relief. The creditors turned away, the future that had opened like a flower after 3 years of slow withering. She thought about this manor dark and full of secrets, about the man who was not a man standing in her doorway, about blood and pawns in a year of lying. The first blood moon, she said. When is it? 3 days. The moon will be full in 3 days. 3 days to decide. 3 days to choose between the life she knew and the one that terrified her. I'll give you my answer then, Rosalind said. Dorian nodded once. Then he left. Rosalind sat alone in her room, staring at the red silk gloves. Outside, somewhere in the darkness, a wolf howled, or perhaps it was something else. She did not sleep that first night. How could she? Every sound in the old manor seemed magnified. Floorboards creaking, wind against windows, the settling of ancient wood and stone, and underneath it all, a feeling, a presence, not threatening, just there, like someone standing just outside her awareness. The bond had not formed yet, but already Rosalind felt the edges of it. When dawn finally came gray and cold, she rose and dressed herself. Her fingers fumbled with buttons. No maid had been assigned. Perhaps Dorian thought she would leave before there was need. Perhaps she would. Rosalind made her way downstairs, following the scent of coffee and bread, to what must be the breakfast room. Smaller than the formal dining room, with windows overlooking the wild garden. Dorian was not there. She poured coffee from a silver pot, added sugar, and sat alone at the long table. The coffee was excellent, the bread fresh, everything perfect and empty. Mrs. Sybil appeared in the doorway. His lordship left early this morning. He will return before sunset. Does he always leave at dawn? Always. Mrs. Sybil's expression remained neutral. Will you require anything else, madam? The library. May I use it? Something flickered across the housekeeper's face. The library belonged to the late mistress. His lordship has not entered it since her death. But I may, he did not forbid it, which was not the same as permission. But Rosalind had not asked for permission. Thank you, Mrs. Sybil. The housekeeper left. Rosalind finished her coffee in silence and went in search of the library. She found it on the second floor in the south wing. The door stood slightly ajar as if someone had left in a hurry and never returned. Rosalind pushed it open. The room took her breath away. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined every wall, filled with books in leather bindings. A fireplace dominated one end, cold and dark. Near the window sat a reading chair, worn comfortable with years of use, and everywhere the smell of old paper and dust and time. This room had been loved once, used, cherished. Now it sat abandoned, a monument to someone who no longer existed. Rosalind walked along the shelves reading spines. Poetry, philosophy, novels in French and English, in languages she did not recognize. Medical text, histories, a collection that spoke of an educated mind. Marguerite's collection, Marguerite's room, Marguerite's ghost. On a small table near the window, Rosalind found a journal. Leather-bound, well-worn. She picked it up carefully, opened it to the first page. The handwriting was elegant and precise. The date, April 1868, 28 years ago. Today I married a stranger. His name is Dorian Ashcroft, and I do not love him. But perhaps love will come, or perhaps it will not matter. Rosalind's hands trembled. She should not be reading this, should not be prying into a dead woman's private thoughts. But she could not stop. She turned pages reading snippets. The early entries were formal, distant. Marguerite wrote about weather, social calls, books she read, the life of a wife with nothing to say. Then 6 months and the tone changed. I felt it today, the bond, like a thread pulling at my heart. I looked up from my book and knew, simply knew that Dorian was thinking of me. Is this what love feels like, or is it something else? Rosalind flipped forward. More entries. Marguerite's handwriting, growing less steady, entries shorter, more fragmented. The bond frightens me. I cannot explain why. It is not painful, but it is always there. His emotions bleeding into mine. His ancient sadness. Sometimes I cannot tell where I end and he begins. Further still, now whole pages had been torn out. Rough edges where someone had ripped them free. What had been written there? The final entry was dated December 1874, 6 years into the marriage. I am dying. The doctors do not know why, but I know I can feel it. The bond drains something from me. Not blood, not life force, but something essential. The part that makes me human. Dorian does not see it. He thinks I have consumption. He tends me with such care, such guilt in his eyes, but he does not understand. The entry ended there. No signature, no farewell, just those words hanging in silence. Rosalind closed the journal carefully and set it back on the table. Her hands were shaking. Her heart raced. Marguerite believed the bond killed her. Whether it was true or not, she believed it. And Rosalind had 3 days to decide if she was willing to risk the same fate. She spent the next 2 days in the library reading. Not Marguerite's journal, though it sat there like a weight on the table impossible to ignore. Instead, she read the books, looking for answers. Dorian did not appear. Mrs. Sybil brought meals on trays and asked no questions. Pearl, a young maid with kind eyes, tended the fire and smiled shyly whenever their paths crossed. The manor settled around Rosalind like a held breath. On the 3rd day, she was invited to a gathering at the Pemberton estate. A small affair, Mrs. Sybil explained. New Year's celebration. His lordship will accompany you, the housekeeper said. So Rosalind dressed in one of the new gowns that had appeared in her wardrobe. Deep blue silk. She pulled on the red gloves Dorian had given her. They fit perfectly, like they had been made for her hands alone. The carriage arrived at sunset. Dorian stepped in, immaculate in black evening wear. He looked at her gloves but said nothing. They rode in silence for most of the journey. Then as city lights began to appear through windows, Dorian spoke. Tonight you will meet others like me. Vampires who move through London society as if they belong there. They will be polite, charming, perfect. Do not trust any of them. Not even you. His lips curved slightly. Especially not me. The Pemberton house blazed with light. Inside, the party was already underway. Rosalind took Dorian's arm and they entered together. The room fell silent for a heartbeat. Then conversation resumed, but Rosalind felt eyes on them. Curious, calculating, hungry. Lady Pemberton swept forward, all smiles. Mr. Ashcroft and the new Mrs. Ashcroft. Lady Pemberton. Dorian inclined his head. You must tell me everything, dear. How are you settling into married life? It is an adjustment, Rosalind said carefully. Before she could elaborate, a man appeared at her elbow. Tall, golden-haired, with eyes like amber and a smile that was all teeth. Forgive the interruption, but I simply must be introduced to the woman who finally captured Dorian Ashcroft's heart. Dorian's hand tightened on Rosalind's arm. So slightly, but she felt it. Lord Vale, Dorian said. His voice was ice. Lord Vale Cassian. Vale, I presume. Rosalind kept her voice level. Mrs. Ashcroft. Or may I call you Rosalind? You may not. Cassian's smile widened. Direct, I like that. Dorian always did prefer women with spirit. He paused. His first wife was quite spirited, until she wasn't. The threat hung in the air. Rosalind felt Dorian's entire body go rigid beside her. If you'll excuse us, Dorian said. He guided Rosalind away firmly. Cassian's laughter followed them. That was him, Rosalind said quietly. The enemy you mentioned. Yes. He knows about Marguerite. Everyone knows about Marguerite. She died, I mourned. It is not a secret. Dorian stopped at the edge of the room near a window looking onto darkness. But Cassian knows how to make old pain feel fresh. What does he want? My position, my power, my life. Dorian looked down at her. And now he will want to use you to get it. Before Rosalind could respond, a woman in scarlet silk approached, beautiful with dark hair and darker eyes. Lady Octavia, Dorian said, wariness in his voice. Dorian, how wonderful to see you settled at last. Lady Octavia's eyes swept over Rosalind with precision. And this must be the fortunate bride. I'm still learning the history, Rosalind said. Oh, there's so much to learn. The Ashcroft legacy, the manor, the first Mrs. Ashcroft. Octavia's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. Did you know the library was hers? She spent hours there, reading, writing, fading away. That's enough, Octavia, Dorian said. I'm only making conversation. She smiled at Rosalind. Do visit me sometime, dear. I'll tell you stories about your husband. She glided away, leaving behind the scent of roses and something acrid underneath. Friend or foe? Rosalind asked. Both, neither. Octavia collects information the way others collect art, and she sells it to the highest bidder. They endured the rest of the party in carefully managed silence. Dorian introduced her to vampire after vampire, each one polite, imperfect, and wrong, in ways Rosalind could not quite name, each one looking at her like she was something temporary. By the time they returned to the carriage, exhaustion had settled into Rosalind's bones. Tomorrow is the blood moon, Dorian said, as the carriage rolled through dark streets. If you have decided to leave, tell me tonight. I will make the arrangements. Rosalind stared out the window at passing shadows. She thought about Marguerite's journal. She thought about Cassian Vale's smile. She thought about 12 other women who had said no. I'm not leaving, she said. Dorian turned to look at her. You're certain? No, but I'm staying anyway. Why? She met his eyes in the darkness. Because you need me. Because my family needs you. Because I made a promise. She paused. And because I'm curious what happens to the woman who says yes. Something that might have been respect flickered across his face. It may destroy you. It might. Rosalind turned back to the window. Or I might surprise us both. The carriage rolled on through the night, carrying them back to the manor, back to the choice that waited, back to the blood moon rising tomorrow. Rosalind felt the weight of it settling over her like a cloak. Heavy, inescapable. Hers. Tomorrow she would give her blood to a vampire king. Tomorrow the bond would form. Tomorrow everything would change. She was not ready, but she would do it anyway. Because that was what survival looked like. That was what courage looked like. Not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. The moon hung in the sky, almost full. One more night until it ripened. One more night of being entirely human. Rosalind pressed her gloved hands together and counted her own heartbeats. Still hers. Still mortal. Still free. For one more night. The blood moon rose on a January night that felt like the edge of the world. Rosalind stood at her bedroom window watching the moon climb into a sky scattered with stars. It hung there massive and pale, not yet the full crimson folklore promised, but close. Somewhere in the manor, a clock struck midnight. Then a knock at her door. Soft, expected. "Come in," she said. Dorian entered carrying a small case of dark wood. He had changed into something simpler. A white shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows. No coat, no armor. Just him looking more human than she had ever seen him, and somehow more dangerous for it. "Are you ready?" he asked, the same question he had asked at their wedding. "No," Rosalind said, "but let's begin anyway." He set the case on the small table near the fireplace and opened it. Inside, nestled in black velvet, lay a silver knife, small, ceremonial, the handle carved with symbols she did not recognize. "It will be quick," Dorian said. "A small cut across your wrist. I will drink very little. Then it's done. And the bond forms immediately. Within moments, you will feel it like a door opening inside your mind. My emotions will bleed through. It will be disorienting at first." Rosalind sat in the chair near the fire. Dorian knelt before her. The gesture was shockingly vulnerable. A king kneeling at the feet of a woman who was not truly his wife. "Give me your hand," he said quietly. She held out her left hand. It trembled slightly. Dorian removed the red silk glove with infinite care, sliding it off finger by finger. His touch was cool but careful, as if she were made of something fragile. He turned her hand palm up, exposing the pale underside of her wrist. Blue veins showed clearly beneath the skin. Her pulse beat visibly. Human, mortal, alive. "It will hurt for a moment," he said. "I'm sorry." "Don't apologize, just do it." He picked up the knife. The blade caught firelight and turned it into liquid silver. Then he pressed the edge to her wrist and drew it across in one swift, clean motion. The pain was sharp and immediate. Rosalind gasped, tried to pull away, but Dorian held her wrist steady. Blood welled up from the cut dark red against pale skin, and Dorian lowered his mouth to the wound. The sensation was nothing like Rosalind had imagined. Not violent, not invasive. His lips were cool against her skin, his mouth gentle. She felt the pull of it like water flowing out of a vessel. Not much, just enough. Then something else happened. A door opened inside her mind. A door she had not known existed, suddenly swinging wide, and through it came a flood of emotions that were not hers. Loneliness, vast and ancient and deep as an ocean. Guilt, sharp as broken glass. Fear, not for himself, for her. And underneath it all, something warm. Gratitude. Relief. The smallest spark of hope. The intensity overwhelmed her. Rosalind made a small sound, half gasp, half sob. Dorian immediately released her wrist and pulled back. "Too much?" he asked. His voice was rough. "I can feel you," she whispered. "Inside my head. Your emotions." "I know. I feel yours too." She looked at him, really looked at him. His eyes had darkened. Blood stained his lips. Her blood. He was lonely. So lonely. Centuries of it piled up like snow in an empty field. "How long have you been alone?" Rosalind asked. Dorian stood abruptly, turning away. "The bond is formed. The ritual is complete." He picked up a cloth from the case and handed it to her. "Wrap your wrist. It will heal quickly now." "You didn't answer my question." "Because it is a question. And our agreement was made when I thought you were human, when I didn't know I would feel your loneliness like it's my own." Rosalind wrapped the cloth around her wrist. "How long, Dorian?" He stood with his back to her, shoulders rigid. 7 years. Since Marguerite died. 7 years. The same length of time as a fairy tale curse. And before Marguerite, centuries. He turned to look at her. "Do you understand what I am? I have lived for 312 years. I have loved and lost and forgotten more people than you will ever meet. Everyone I care for dies." "Then why did you marry again?" "Because Cassian Vale gave me no choice. Because I need the image of stability. Because," he stopped. The bond pulsed between them. She felt his frustration, his anger at himself. "Because you were tired of being alone," Rosalind finished softly. He said nothing, but she felt the truth of it through the bond. "The ritual is complete," Dorian said. "You should rest." He left. Rosalind sat alone with her bandaged wrist and a vampire king's emotions echoing inside her mind. She did not sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt him, somewhere in the east wing, working at something. Occasionally a spike of frustration, once something that might have been amusement, then back to that steady loneliness. By morning, exhaustion had settled into her bones, but the bond had quieted to a manageable hum, like background music, always there but no longer overwhelming. Rosalind dressed and went downstairs. Dorian was already in the breakfast room. The sight of him sitting at the table reading a newspaper in morning light was unexpected. He looked up. Their eyes met, and she felt his surprise through the bond. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Please." She poured coffee, added sugar, and sat. The newspaper lay between them on the table. "May I?" Rosalind asked, indicating the paper. Dorian slid it across without a word. She read in silence. After a few minutes, she found an article that made her laugh. A report about Parliament, some ridiculous argument over trade tariffs. "Listen to this," she said and read the absurd quotes aloud. When she finished, she looked up. Dorian was watching her with an expression she could not quite read. But through the bond, she felt it. Surprise. And beneath it, the smallest warmth. He almost smiled. This became their routine. Each morning, the newspaper. Each morning, coffee shared in comfortable silence. February passed in strange quietness. Rosalind explored the manor, learning its corridors and rooms. She spent hours in Marguerite's library, reading books, carefully avoiding the journal. Mrs. Sybil maintained professional distance, but Pearl, the young maid, grew friendlier. She brought tea and afternoons lingered to chat about harmless things. Dorian appeared only in mornings and late evenings. He kept to his work in the East Wing, but the bond hummed between them constant, and slowly, carefully, she felt something new creeping in. Interest, curiosity, directed at her. He was paying attention. The second blood moon came at the end of February. The ritual was still uncomfortable, still strange, but familiar now. The bond deepened. Rosalind felt more of him, and he more of her. The boundary between them blurred slightly, like watercolors bleeding together. March arrived with rain and wind, and Rosalind began to change. It started small, a paper cut that healed in minutes instead of days. A stumble that should have left bruises, but didn't. Then came the morning she woke before dawn, able to see perfectly in the dark. Rosalind sat up in bed, staring at her room. No candle burned, no fire in the grate. The curtains were drawn. She saw everything. The texture of wallpaper, the grain of wood furniture. All of it clear as day, just rendered in shades of gray. Fear spiked through her. She felt an answering surge through the bond. Dorian's concern sharp and immediate. Moments later, he was at her door. "Rosalind," she opened the door. He stood in the hallway, fully dressed despite the hour. "What's wrong?" he asked. "I felt your fear. I can see in the dark. Perfectly." He went very still. "Since when?" "Just now." Dorian stepped into her room. "Show me." She pointed to the far corner where shadows should have hidden everything. "There's a book on that table. Poetry. The spine is dark green with gold lettering." He walked to the table, picked up the book, turned it over. The bond carried waves of alarm and guilt. "It's the bond," he said quietly. "It's changing you." "Into what?" "I don't know. This has never happened before." "Marguerite, never." He stopped, set the book down carefully. "I'll stop the rituals. We'll break the bond." "No." "Rosalind, you're transforming." I said no. She moved closer to him. "We have a deal. 1 year, 12 blood moons. We're only 3 months in. I won't sacrifice you the way I sacrificed her." The pain in his voice was almost physical. Rosalind reached out and took his hand. Cool skin, steady despite everything. "You didn't sacrifice Marguerite. She was ill." She paused. "I'm not Marguerite." Through the bond, she felt his war with himself, the desire to protect her, the fear of loss, the growing realization that she would not be dissuaded. "If it gets worse," he said finally, "if you feel weak or sick, I'll tell you, I promise." He nodded slowly, then his eyes focused past her. "Someone is in the garden, watching the house." She followed him to the window, peered out into pre-dawn darkness. With her new vision, she saw him clearly, a figure in dark clothes standing near the wall. "Cassian," Dorian said. The figure raised one hand in a mocking wave. Then he was gone, moving with impossible speed. "He knows about the bond," Rosalind said. "He knows it's changing me, which means he'll use it." Dorian's jaw was tight. "Everything that happens to you becomes a weapon in his hands. Then we don't let him use it. We stay the course, complete the year. And if the bond breaks you instead..." Rosalind turned to face him fully. "You're starting to care about me, not as a political asset, as a person." The bond flared between them. His emotions laid bare despite his neutral expression. Surprise, denial. And underneath it all, the truth. The slow, reluctant warmth that had been growing since the first breakfast they shared. "That changes nothing," Dorian said. "It changes everything." They stood there in the darkness, connected by invisible threads of blood and magic and something more fragile. Then Dorian stepped back, breaking the moment. Dawn is coming, he said. I should go. He left. Rosalind stood alone watching through the window as the sky slowly lightened. Her vision returned to normal as the sun rose. Gradual, barely noticeable, but it confirmed what she already knew. She was becoming something other than human. April brought warmth in London society. Invitations arrived, dinner parties, balls, theater performances. Rosalind wore her new gowns, her carefully constructed smile. She played the role of Mrs. Ashcroft with increasing skill. And everywhere they went, Cassian Vale appeared, always polite, always watching. The bond made lying impossible. Every time Cassian approached, Rosalind felt Dorian's tension spike. They were an open book to each other now. It should have been unbearable. Instead, Rosalind found it oddly comforting. Someone finally saw her, really saw her. They were becoming something. Partners, allies. Then came the fifth blood moon in May and everything intensified. The ritual happened as always. The knife, the blood, the drinking. But this time when the bond deepened, Rosalind felt something shift inside her body. Not painful, just different. Strength flooded into her muscles. Her senses sharpened further. She could hear heartbeats in the room below. Could smell smoke from the fireplace 2 floors down. Rosalind, Dorian pulled back concern on his face. What's happening? She stood, tested her balance, felt power coiling in her limbs. I'm stronger, she said. I can feel it. Faster, sharper. Not vampire. She still felt warmth, still breathed, still had a heartbeat, but not entirely human either. We stop now, Dorian said. This has gone too far. No. Rosalind turned to face him. Don't you see? Whatever this is, it's not killing me. It's making me stronger, strong enough to stand beside you. You're changing into something unknown, something powerful. She held out her hand. It did not shake. I chose this. I chose to stay. Whatever I'm becoming, it's my choice. Through the bond, she felt his helplessness, his fear, his growing realization that he could not protect her from the consequences of her own decisions. And underneath it all, that warmth, growing stronger, harder to deny. He cared about her, perhaps more than he wanted to admit. If you continue, he said quietly, there may be no going back. The changes may become permanent. Good, Rosalind said. I don't want to go back. The months that followed blurred together in a rhythm Rosalind had not expected. June, July, August, September, October, November. 6 more blood moons. 6 more times the bond deepened. 6 more times the changes intensified. By the time December arrived, Rosalind could run faster than any horse, could hear whispered conversations 3 rooms away, could heal from injuries in hours instead of days. She was becoming Dampier, half human, half vampire, something that should not exist. And through it all, the bond between her and Dorian grew not just in power but in warmth, in understanding, in something that felt dangerously like no. She would not name it yet. Early December brought the 11th blood moon, and the next morning it brought Pearl's disappearance. Rosalind came down for breakfast to find Mrs. Sybil standing in the hallway, her usually neutral expression replaced by genuine distress. Pearl, Rosalind asked, what's happened? Gone, madam. Her bed wasn't slept in. She simply vanished. Dorian emerged from his study moving fast. When sometime in the night. Through the bond, Rosalind felt Dorian's immediate understanding. This was not a simple disappearance. Cassian, she said. Yes. Dorian's voice was flat. Dangerous. He's escalating. They found the note an hour later tucked into the morning newspaper. Meet me at the old cathedral. Noon. Come alone or she dies. CV. Absolutely not, Dorian said when Rosalind reached for her coat. This is a trap. He has Pearl. I'm aware I'll handle it, like you handled the last 11 months of his threats. Rosalind fastened her coat. I'm going. Rosalind, you can't stop me. She felt his frustration surge through the connection, his fear. Then I'm coming with you, he said. They stared at each other, the bond hummed between them carrying stubborn determination from both sides. Finally, Rosalind nodded. You stay outside. Hidden. 20 minutes. Done. The old cathedral sat on the edge of London, abandoned for decades. Rosalind entered alone at precisely noon. The interior was vast and empty. Sunlight fell through the broken roof in dusty shafts. At the far end, Cassian Vale stood waiting. Pearl knelt beside him, bound in gagged terror in her eyes. Mrs. Ashcroft. Cassian's smile was warm as summer and twice as poisonous. How good of you to come. Let her go. Of course, eventually. First, we talk. Rosalind walked forward, slowly aware that Dorian waited outside, that the bond carried her emotions to him. What do you want, Cassian? The same thing I've always wanted, Dorian's position. Cassian circled Pearl like a predator. But I've realized something interesting. This transformation you're undergoing, do you have any idea how rare that is? Ice ran down Rosalind's spine. What are you talking about? The blood bond doesn't change humans, ever, unless the human carries something special in their bloodline, something old, something powerful. I don't understand. Van Helsing blood, Cassian said softly. You're descended from the greatest vampire hunters in history. That's why the bond is transforming you instead of draining you. You're becoming something new, something between human and vampire. The words fell like hammer blows. Rosalind felt the truth of them. It made terrible sense. How did you know? She whispered. Because I've been searching for Van Helsing descendants for 200 years. You were delivered to me by accident, by Dorian's desperate need for a wife. What do you want from me? Cassian's smile widened. I want you to help me destroy him. Never. Not even to save this girl. He crouched beside Pearl. Let me show you what I have on Dorian. Documents from 1837. Proof that he signed papers covering up vampire feeding deaths. He produced papers from his coat, spread them on the dusty floor. Financial records, official stamps, and signatures. Multiple signatures, all in Dorian's distinctive hand. He was young, only 20 years into his reign, inexperienced, frightened. So when the old guard came and demanded he sign these papers, he did. He protected murderers to keep his throne. Through the bond, Rosalind felt Dorian outside. His tension, his awareness that something was wrong. Even if these are real, she said slowly, why tell me? Because exposure is boring. I want him to suffer first. I want him to watch everything he cares about crumble. Starting with you. Cassian stood. Work with me. Convince him to abdicate peacefully. I become king, you and Pearl go free. Except the people who value justice. Justice from a man who married you under false pretenses, who's transforming you into something inhuman without your informed consent. Rosalind looked at Pearl. The girl's eyes pleaded silently. She looked at the documents. Then she said the words that changed everything. I'll help you. Through the bond, she felt Dorian's shock, his betrayal. She pushed one thought through the connection with all the force she could manage. Trust me. Cassian's smile turned triumphant. Excellent. But I have conditions. First, Pearl goes free now. Second, I need time to convince Dorian. 5 days. Done. Cassian gestured and someone emerged from the shadows to cut Pearl free. The girl scrambled to her feet and ran for the door. And my second condition, I want to see these documents authenticated. I don't trust you. For a moment, anger flickered in Cassian's eyes. Then it smoothed away. Smart girl. Very well, tomorrow night. The Blackwell estate. And Cassian, if you approach me again before then, I tell Dorian everything. He walked past her. Then he was gone. Rosalind stood there shaking. Through the bond, she felt Dorian's approach. Seconds later, he burst through the door. What did you do? His voice was raw. What did you promise him? I bought us time. She turned to face him. Did you sign those documents 1837, covering up vampire murders? His face went very still. Yes. The admission hit like a physical blow. What, Piana? Because I was young and stupid and frightened of losing everything. Because the old families threatened to remove me. Because I made a choice I have regretted every day since. He moved closer. I am not a good man, Rosalind. I never claimed to be. But you're not a murderer. No, but I protected murderers. She absorbed this. The documents, are they real or forgeries? I don't know. Cassian could have access to originals, or he could have created perfect copies. I'm seeing them tomorrow night. He's having them authenticated. Dorian's eyes widened. He's luring you into a secondary trap. Obviously, which is why you're going to help me prepare. She stepped closer. I told Cassian I would convince you to abdicate. I have 5 days, which means we have 5 days to figure out what he's really planning. Through the bond, she felt his emotions shift, surprise, grudging respect, and that warmth again stronger now. Why are you helping me? He asked quietly. Because whatever you did in 1837, you've spent 60 years trying to atone for it. Because everyone deserves a second chance. Because, she paused, because I choose to. They stood there in the dusty cathedral light, connected by blood and magic and something more fragile. Something that felt dangerously like trust. Tomorrow night, Dorian said. We'll go together. Hidden. He'll know. Then we'll be very, very careful. The authentication happened at an old estate on the outskirts of London. Rosalind arrived at midnight wearing dark clothes. Dorian was somewhere in the shadows, close enough to feel through the bond. Inside, 3 scholars waited. Cassian stood to the side, watching. Examine them, he said, gesturing to documents spread on the table. The scholars worked for 2 hours, checking signatures, testing ink, examining paper. Finally, the lead scholar looked up. These documents are authentic. The signatures match Lord Ashcroft's hand from the period. The ink and paper are consistent with 1837. Rosalind felt her heart sink. Through the bond, she felt Dorian's resignation. Thank you, gentlemen, Cassian said. You may go. The scholars left. Rosalind and Cassian stood alone. So, Cassian said, now you know the truth. He made mistakes. He enabled murders. 60 years ago, people change. Vampires don't change. Cassian moved closer. You have 4 days left. Convince him to step down, or I take these to the council. He left. Rosalind stood alone staring at the documents. Then she moved closer, picked one up, held it to the light, and saw it. The forgery was perfect. Almost. But there in the corner of one signature, a tiny imperfection, the way the D in Dorian curled, just slightly wrong. She had seen him sign documents dozens of times. Every morning, every evening. This was not his signature. It was close, brilliant, nearly perfect, but not his. Through the bond, she sent one clear thought. The documents are fake. She felt his response. Shock, relief, then immediate understanding. Rosalind left the estate and found Dorian waiting in the shadows. The signatures are wrong, she said quietly. Whoever forged them was good, but not perfect. Which means the originals were destroyed years ago. Cassian manufactured evidence. Dorian's jaw was tight. But how do we prove it? We find who he paid to create the forgeries. That could take weeks. We have 4 days. Then we work fast. They rode back to the manor in silence. The bond hummed between them, carrying a determination from both sides. When they arrived home, Mrs. Sybil was waiting in the entrance hall, tears on her face. Madam, she said, I must speak with you, in private. Rosalind followed her to the library. Dorian stayed at the doorway. I've been spying for Lord Vale, Mrs. Sybil said without preamble. For 3 years. He promised me information about Lady Marguerite's death. The words fell like stones. Rosalind felt Dorian's shock through the bond. You betrayed me, he said quietly. Yes, Mrs. Sybil's voice broke. And I'm sorry, but I learned something tonight. Lord Vale is planning to attack the manor tomorrow, to take the documents directly to the council. He never intended to give you 5 days. Where is he now? Dorian's voice was ice. I don't know, but I know where he's keeping the documents he claims are originals. She produced a key, his private study, in his London house. Rosalind took the key. Why tell us now? Because I saw you tonight, the way you fought for him. Mrs. Sybil looked at her with something like wonder. Lady Marguerite never did that. You do. And that means something. Before Rosalind could respond, Cassian's vampires burst through the windows, 3 of them moving with inhuman speed. Dorian reacted instantly, throwing himself between Rosalind and the attackers. Mrs. Sybil grabbed a fire poker. Run, Dishta, Dorian shouted, but Rosalind did not run. The bond between them pulled tight, and she felt his fear for her, his desperate need to protect her, and something inside her snapped. The strength that had been building for 11 months exploded outward. She moved without thinking, grabbed one attacker and threw him across the room with impossible force, dodged another strike with inhuman speed, felt power coursing through her veins. This was what the bond had been creating. Not a vampire, not human, something between. The fight lasted seconds. When it ended, the 3 attackers lay unconscious, and Rosalind stood in the center of the library, breathing hard, staring at her own hands. What am I? She whispered. Dampier, Mrs. Sybil said softly. Half human, half vampire. The bond awakened what was already there, your Van Helsing blood. Dorian stared at her. Through the bond, she felt his awe, his fear, his growing realization of what she had become. We need to go, he said. Now, before Cassian sends more. The documents, Rosalind said. We need the originals. It's a trap. Everything is a trap, but we spring it anyway. She turned to Mrs. Sybil. Can you get us into his study? The housekeeper nodded. I'll come with you. You don't have to. Yes, I do. I failed, Lady Marguerite. I won't fail you. They moved fast. Out of the manor into the carriage racing toward London, Cassian's London house stood dark and silent. They entered through a servant's entrance, Mrs. Sybil leading the way. Inside the study, in a safe behind a painting, they found documents. Rosalind examined them carefully. These were different from the ones she had seen earlier. Older, more worn, and completely authentic. He does have originals, she breathed, but look, Dorian pointed to the dates. These aren't from 1837. They're from 1845. 8 years later, after the murders were already prosecuted. These are legal closure documents, not cover-ups. Understanding crashed through Rosalind. He showed the scholars forgeries, made them think those were the real cover-up documents. But the actual papers from 1837 don't exist because they never existed in the first place. I never signed cover-up documents. I refused. That's why the old families tried to remove me in 1838. Dorian's laugh was bitter. Cassian built his entire blackmail scheme on a lie. We have to show these to the council. It won't matter. They won't believe us. A sound behind them. They turned. Cassian stood in the doorway, amber eyes gleaming with fury. Clever girl, he said softly. You underestimated both of us, Rosalind replied. Perhaps, but it doesn't matter now. The council is already on their way. I called them hours ago. Told them about Dorian's crimes, about his blood bond with a Van Helsing descendant, about how he's been transforming you illegally. His smile was poison. They're coming to execute you both. Through the bond, Rosalind felt Dorian's despair. Unless, Cassian continued, you give me what I want. Dorian abdicates, immediately, and I'll tell the council it was all a misunderstanding. And if we refuse, Rosalind asked, then you both die, tonight. The choice hung in the air. Rosalind felt Dorian's resignation through the bond, his willingness to sacrifice everything to save her. No, she thought fiercely. We don't surrender. She looked at Mrs. Sybil. The housekeeper nodded slightly. Dorian, Rosalind said quietly, do you trust me? Through the bond, she felt his answer before he spoke it. Yes. Then run. She moved. Mrs. Sybil moved. Together, they created chaos. Furniture overturned, paper scattered. Seconds were enough. Rosalind and Dorian burst through the window, landing in the street below. Cassian's roar followed them. They ran through London streets, the bond pulling them together. Behind them, Mrs. Sybil's scream cut through the night. Rosalind stopped, tried to go back, but Dorian pulled her forward. She chose this, he said, grief in his voice. She chose to give us time. They ran until they collapsed in an alley, breathing hard, holding each other in the darkness. Through the bond, Rosalind felt everything. Dorian's grief for Mrs. Sybil, his fear for their future. The council will be at the manor within hours, he said. We can't go back. Then we go forward. We go to the council ourselves. We show them the real documents. We tell them the truth. We fight. They won't listen. They'll listen to me, a Van Helsing descendant bonded to a vampire king. That's never happened before. I'm living proof the bond doesn't have to be destructive. Through the bond, she felt his hope kindle. Small, fragile, but there's a gathering, Dorian said slowly. 3 days from now, the winter solstice. All the council will be present. Then we have 3 days to prepare. They stood together in the alley. The bond hummed between them stronger than ever. Rosalind reached out and took his hand, his cool skin against her warmer flesh. 3 days, she said. 3 days, he agreed. And somewhere in London, the blood moon began to rise. They had 3 days. Dorian found them shelter in an abandoned church on the edge of London. Stone walls thick enough to muffle sound. A crypt below ground where he could rest during brightest daylight hours. Rosalind sat in the nave as dawn broke on the first day, watching light creep across the dusty floor. Pearl appeared at noon bringing food and news. The council arrived at the manor last night, Pearl said, setting down a basket. They searched everything. Cassian told them you both fled because of guilt. Did they believe him? Rosalind asked. Some did, but Elder Thaddeus, the oldest one, seemed uncertain. Kept asking why Lord Ashcroft would run if he truly believed himself innocent. Pearl paused. There's something else. Lady Octavia came to the manor. She was asking questions about Mrs. Sybil. Rosalind's chest tightened. Is there news? Pearl's face fell. She's dead, miss. Cassian claimed she attacked him. Self-defense, he called it. The words landed like stones. Through the bond somewhere below in the crypt, Rosalind felt Dorian's grief surge. Another death on the ledger. Lady Octavia didn't believe it. Pearl continued quietly. I could tell she knows something isn't right. Will she speak against Cassian? I don't know, miss. She's careful. Rosalind nodded slowly. Thank you, Pearl, for everything. You saved me from that cathedral. This is the least I can do. The girl smiled, small and determined. I'll come back tomorrow. She left. Rosalind sat alone, feeling the bond hum between her and Dorian, his grief, his guilt. She stood and made her way down to the crypt. He sat on the stone floor back against the wall, looking more human than she had ever seen him. Vulnerable, tamebo, tired. I heard, he said before she could speak, through the bond. I'm sorry about Mrs. Sybil. She made her choice, a brave one. He looked up at her. They all make choices around me, and they all end the same way. Rosalind sat beside him on the cold stone. I'm not dead. Not yet. Stop. You've been with me for 11 months, and already you've been threatened, changed, hunted. Your transformation into Dhampir wasn't supposed to happen. His voice cracked. I'm 300 years old, and I still destroy everything I touch. Rosalind reached out and took his hand. His skin was cool, but she was warmer now, the gap narrowing. You didn't destroy me, she said quietly. You gave me power, strength, the ability to stand beside you instead of behind you. That's transformation. Transformation you didn't ask for. I asked to stay. Every blood moon I chose to continue. Those were my choices, Dorian, not yours. Through the bana she felt his defenses crumbling, the guilt giving way to something more fragile. Hope. The council will demand proof, he said finally. Proof that our bond is genuine, that our marriage is real. They'll want to see the full ritual, the 12th blood moon. Then we show them. You understand what that means? The 12th moon completes the transformation. There's no going back. You'll be Dhampir permanently. Bound to me for as long as you live, which could be centuries now. I know. And you're still willing. Rosalind turned to face him fully. In the dim light, his eyes were dark as midnight. I stopped being willing about 3 months ago, she said. No, I'm choosing. There's a difference. He stared at her. Through the bond, she felt his emotions shifting. Surprise, confusion, and underneath it all, that warmth. No longer a spark, a flame. Why, he whispered. The question hung between them. Heavy, dangerous, honest. Because somewhere between the fear and the blood moons in the morning newspapers, I stopped seeing a vampire king and started seeing you. Just you. Lonely and guilty, and trying so hard to protect everyone that you forget to protect yourself. She paused. And because when I look at the next 60 years or 100 years or however long this transformation gives me, I can't imagine spending them with anyone else. The silence that followed was profound. Then Dorian leaned forward and kissed her. It was not their first kiss. That had happened at the wedding, brief, informal, and empty. This was different. This was real. His mouth cool against hers, his hand cupping her face with infinite gentleness, the bond flaring bright between them. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. If we survive the council, if we make it through this trial, I'm going to court you properly. Flowers, poetry, all the ridiculous romantic gestures I should have done from the beginning. Rosalind smiled. I'll hold you to that. They sat together in the crypt as the day passed overhead, connected, quiet, preparing for the storm. The second day brought unexpected allies. Lady Octavia arrived at sunset, sweeping into the abandoned church like she owned it. You've made quite a mess, she said without preamble. Lady Octavia. Dorian emerged from the shadows. I'm surprised to see you here. Are you... You shouldn't be. I've been collecting information about Cassian Vale for 50 years, waiting for him to overreach. This seems to be that moment. She produced a folder from her bag, documents, letters, financial records, all bearing Cassian's seal. For decades, he's been consolidating power, bribing council members, eliminating rivals. I've documented it all, waiting for the right time to use it, but I needed leverage, something undeniable. And now you have it, Rosalind asked. I have you. Octavia's smile was sharp. A Van Helsing descendant successfully bonded to a vampire king, transformed into Dhampir without dying. That's never happened in recorded history. It proves the bond can be more than parasitic. That coexistence is possible. Do you understand what that means politically? It undermines every law about vampire-human separation, Dorian said slowly. Precisely. And Cassian has built his entire bid for power on maintaining those old laws. You two are living proof that his philosophy is obsolete. Octavia's eyes gleamed, which is why he wants you dead before the council can examine you properly. Why help us? Rosalind asked. What I've always wanted, a place in history as the one who ushered in a new age, and perhaps the satisfaction of watching Cassian Vale's face when he realizes he's been outmaneuvered. She left them with the documents and a promise to speak at the council gathering. The third day brought rain. Rosalind stood at the church door watching water pour from the London sky. Behind her, Dorian prepared for the ritual. He had sent Pearl to retrieve items from the manor. The silver knife, the ceremonial bowl. Are you frightened? He asked. Rosalind turned. He stood in the center of the nave surrounded by candles Pearl had brought. Yes, she said honestly, but not of the transformation, of what comes after, of the council, of Cassian. He'll have one last move, something we haven't anticipated. Then we'll face it together. Dorian crossed to her, took her hands. If something happens tonight, if the council rules against us, they won't. But if they do, Dorian's grip tightened. I want you to know that these 11 months have been the most human I've felt in 300 years. You gave me that. Whatever happens, thank you. Rosalind reached up and touched his face. We're not dying tonight. We're winning. And then you owe me flowers and poetry. He smiled, a real smile reaching his eyes. I remember. The rain continued as the sun set, as the blood moon began its slow climb, as the time came to face judgment. The council gathering took place in the old cathedral in the heart of London. Rosalind and Dorian arrived together walking through rain that had gentled to mist. They entered through the main doors and every vampire in the vast space turned to watch. The council sat at the far end, 7 ancient vampires. Elder Thaddeus was the oldest, his face like carved wood, his eyes holding centuries of judgment. Cassian stood to the side, immaculate in formal dress, his amber eyes tracking Rosalind's every movement. Beside him, 3 council guards. Lady Octavia sat in the gallery, her expression neutral. But when Rosalind's eyes met hers, she nodded once. Dorian Ashcroft. Elder Thaddeus's voice filled the cathedral. You stand accused of deceiving this council, of entering a false marriage to avoid political censure, of illegally transforming a human through blood bond. How do you answer? Dorian stepped forward. I answer that the marriage began as contract but became real, that the transformation was not illegal because it was consensual and previously unknown, and that Lord Cassian Vale has manipulated evidence to serve his own ambition. Murmurs rippled through the assembled vampires. Bold claims, Cassian said smoothly. But where is your proof? I have documents signed by your own hand covering up murders in 1837. You have forgeries and lies, Rosalind said. Her voice rang out clear and strong. And I have proof. She stepped forward, producing the documents they had taken from Cassian's study. The real papers from 1845. These are the authentic records, dated 8 years after the supposed crimes, proving that Dorian Ashcroft refused to sign cover-up documents, that he stood against the old families and nearly lost his position because of it. Your accusations are built on fabricated evidence. Cassian's face tightened. Those papers prove nothing. By you, Lady Octavia's voice cut through his protest. She stood documents in hand. I have records of payments you made to a forger 3 months ago. Correspondence discussing the exact specifications of documents forged from 1837. Bank transfers that match the timeline of your conspiracy. She walked forward and placed the evidence before the council. Lord Vale has been systematically undermining the Northern Territory for 50 years. I have documented bribes, threats, and 3 suspicious deaths. This entire trial is the culmination of his bid for power built on lies. The cathedral erupted in voices. The council raised hands for silence. Elder Thaddeus examined the documents carefully. Minutes passed. Finally, he looked up. These allegations require investigation, but the evidence presented suggests Lord Vale has indeed manipulated this council. His ancient eyes fixed on Cassian. You will be detained pending trial. Guards moved forward. Cassian's amber eyes flashed with rage. You fools! You think this is over? He turned to Rosalind and his smile was poison. Did you never wonder how Marguerite really died? Sweet, fragile Marguerite, who wasted away despite the bond that should have sustained her. Dorian went rigid. What are you saying? I'm saying I killed her. Cassian's voice was soft, deadly. Slowly, over months, small doses of silver in her tea, in her food, enough to weaken her, to make the bond feel like it was draining her, to make you believe the connection was deadly. The cathedral went silent. Rosalind felt Dorian's shock through the bond, his horror. Why? The word came out broken. Because I needed you vulnerable, guilty, afraid to ever bond again. But then this one came along. He gestured at Rosalind. And you bonded anyway, and she didn't die because she has Van Helsing blood, because her heritage protects her from the silver, because she's everything Marguerite wasn't. He laughed. So I failed with her. But I succeeded with Marguerite. For 7 years, you've carried the guilt of her death. That guilt made you weak, made you predictable. Dorian moved before anyone could stop him, faster than thought. His hands closed around Cassian's throat, lifting him off the ground. You murdered her. You poisoned my wife and let me believe I killed her. Dorian, Rosalind's voice cut through the fury. Don't. He's not worth it. Through the bonds she pushed calm, understanding, justice over vengeance. Slowly Dorian lowered Cassian to the ground. Stepped back. His hands shook with the effort of restraint. Take him, son, Elder Thaddeus said. Lord Cassian Vale, you are charged with murder, conspiracy, and treason. You will be tried and sentenced according to our laws. The guards seized Cassian. As they dragged him away, he looked at Rosalind one last time. You think you've won, but you've only delayed the inevitable. The old laws will return. Humans and vampires cannot coexist. You're an aberration. Then he was gone, and the cathedral fell into shocked silence. Elder Thaddeus stood. The accusations against Lord Ashcroft are dismissed. His position as king of the Northern Territory is restored. He paused. However, the matter of the blood bond remains. Mrs. Ashcroft, you have undergone transformation without council oversight. This requires examination. I consent to examination, Rosalind said steadily. The 12th blood moon rises tonight. To prove the bond is genuine and consensual, you will complete the ritual here, before this council. Do you agree? Rosalind looked at Dorian. Through the bond she felt his question, his need to know she truly wanted this. I agree, she said. They prepared the ritual in the center of the cathedral. Candles formed a circle. The silver knife gleamed on a velvet cloth. The assembled vampires watched in silence. This had never been done publicly before. Rosalind and Dorian stood facing each other inside the circle. Are you certain? He asked quietly. I've never been more certain of anything. Elder Thaddeus approached carrying an ancient book. The ritual has 3 parts: blood shared, bond acknowledged, transformation completed. Each must be done willingly. He opened the book. Dorian Ashcroft, King of the Northern Territory. Do you willingly share your blood with this woman? I do. Rosalind Mercer Ashcroft. Do you willingly receive his blood? I do. Then let the first exchange begin. Dorian took the silver knife. Rosalind held out her wrist, bare and pale in candlelight. He made the cut with practiced precision. Blood welled up dark and rich. Then he cut his own wrist and pressed it to hers. Wound to wound, blood to blood. The bond exploded between them. Rosalind gasped as power flooded through her veins. Not painful, not violent, just immense, overwhelming. She felt every emotion Dorian had ever hidden. 300 years of loneliness and loss and love and hope and despair rushing into her all at once. And he felt hers, the desperate girl who had stood in her father's study, the brave woman who had chosen to stay, the transformed creature who had learned to fight and protect and love. The bond is acknowledged, Elder Thaddeus said. Do you, Dorian Ashcroft, accept this connection as permanent and unbreakable? I do. Do you, Rosalind Ashcroft, accept this connection as permanent and unbreakable? I do. Then speak the words of binding. Dorian's eyes never left hers. I bind myself to Rosalind Mercer, my true wife, my equal, for as long as we both shall live. The cathedral held its breath. Rosalind felt the transformation beginning, her body changing at a cellular level, becoming something new. I bind myself to Dorian Ashcroft, she said. Her voice was steady, strong. My true husband, my partner, for as long as we both shall live. The bond completed. Light burst from the circle, blinding and pure. Rosalind felt herself lifted off the ground, suspended in energy that rewrote her very nature. Pain and ecstasy mixed together. Ending and beginning, when the light faded, she stood changed. She could feel the difference immediately. Stronger, faster, her senses heightened beyond even what the previous months had created. She looked at her hands and saw them slightly luminous in the darkness. Dampier, someone in the crowd whispered. Elder Thaddeus approached, examining her with ancient eyes. How do you feel? Alive, Rosalind said. More alive than I've ever been. He nodded slowly. This changes everything we thought we knew about blood bonds, about human-vampire relations, about what is possible. He turned to address the council. I propose we study this transformation, learn from it. Perhaps Mrs. Ashcroft represents not an aberration, but an evolution. The other council members conferred quietly. Then one by one they nodded. The bond is recognized as legitimate, Elder Thaddeus declared. Lord and Lady Ashcroft, your marriage stands validated. The Northern Territory remains under your rule. The cathedral erupted in voices, some approving, some shocked, all uncertain of what this meant for the future. But Rosalind barely heard them. She was focused entirely on Dorian, on the bond between them that was no longer a thread, but a river, flowing both ways, equal, complete. It's done, she said. It's done, he agreed. They left the cathedral together, walking out into rain that had turned to mist. The moon hung above them, full and red. London spread before them, mist and unknowing. Somewhere in the city, Cassian waited in a cell. Somewhere people lived their lives unaware that the world had shifted. But Rosalind and Dorian walked hand in hand, their bond humming between them like a song only they could hear. That night, back at the manor, a lawyer waited in the entrance hall. Lord Ashcroft, Mrs. Ashcroft. He bowed. I have the documents as requested. He opened his case. Inside lay the divorce papers, prepared months ago as specified in the original contract. 1 year of marriage, then separation. The year was complete. The contract fulfilled. Rosalind picked up the papers and read through them carefully. Everything was in order, both their names, the financial arrangements, the terms of separation. All she had to do was sign. Dorian stood across from her, the papers between them like a barrier. I transferred the final payment to your family last night, he said quietly. Everything we agreed upon. They're secure. You've fulfilled your end of the contract. And you've fulfilled yours. The political threats are neutralized. Your position is secure. So we're both free. Yes. Silence filled the entrance hall. I've been thinking, Rosalind said slowly, about that contract, about the girl who signed it a year ago. Desperate, frightened, out of options. And she doesn't exist anymore. The transformation didn't just change my body. It changed everything. I'm not that girl. I'm something else now. Dorian moved closer. What are you, Rosalind looked up at him, this man who had been a stranger. Then a contract, then a companion, then something infinitely more complicated. I'm a woman who fought her way through 12 blood moons and came out stronger, who learned that survival sometimes looks like surrender, but is actually the bravest choice, who discovered that love isn't something that happens to you, it's something you build, together. His eyes widened. Love? Yes. She stood facing him fully. I love you, not because the bond makes me, not because the contract required it, but because you showed me who you really are. Lonely and guilty and trying so hard to be good despite centuries of mistakes. And I looked at all of that and thought, yes, him, I choose him. Through the bond, she felt his emotions breaking like a dam. Joy, disbelief, hope so fierce it hurt. I've lived for 312 years, Dorian said, his voice rough. And no one has ever chosen me. Not really. Marguerite married me because she had to. Others approached me for power, for position. But you, Sam, I choose you for who you are. Not what you are, not what you can give me. Just you. He closed the distance between them in 2 steps, pulled her into his arms. The bond flared bright and warm and right. I love you, he said against her hair. I think I started loving you the morning you read me that ridiculous article about Parliament and laughed, really laughed, like the manor wasn't haunted, like I wasn't a monster, like we were just 2 people sharing breakfast. Rosalind pulled back enough to see his face. What do we do about the divorce papers? We burn them. Both copies, every single page. She smiled. And then what? Then I court you properly, the way I should have from the beginning. And when it feels right, I ask you to marry me again. For real this time. No contract, no conditions. Just a choice. What if I don't want to wait? Rosalind reached up and cupped his face. What if I want you to ask me now? Through the bond, she felt his heart skip, his breath catch. Rosalind Mercer, he said softly, will you marry me not for politics, not for money, not to save anyone, just because I love you and I want to spend every remaining year of my immortal life watching you become more extraordinary with each passing day? Yes, she said, but on one condition. He smiled. Name it. The blood bond continues. 1 moon per month. Forever. I want that connection, that intimacy, that absolute certainty that I know you and you know me. That's not a condition. That's a gift. He kissed her then, deep and true and full of promise. The bond sang between them. Complete, unbreakable, chosen. The lawyer cleared his throat awkwardly. They broke apart laughing. We won't be needing those, Dorian said, gesturing to the divorce papers. Very good, my lord. The lawyer packed them away, bowed and left. Rosalind and Dorian stood alone in the entrance hall of Ashcroft Manor. Outside, rain had stopped. The night was clear. Come with me, Dorian said. There's something I want to show you. He led her to the library, Marguerite's library, the room that had been abandoned for 7 years. But now candles burned on every surface, and on the small table near the window, a bundle of flowers, purple crocuses from the garden. I started preparing this while you were with the council, Dorian said. I didn't know if we would survive, but I hoped. And I thought if we did, I wanted to show you that this room doesn't have to be a monument to the past. It can be ours, shared with her memory, but no longer haunted by it. Rosalind walked to the window, looked out at the garden. The wild tangle had been tamed slightly. She could see where new roses had been planted, red and purple growing together. You did all this today. I had help, Pearl, the staff. They wanted to welcome their new lady properly. Rosalind turned back to him. Thank you. For what? For letting me in, for trusting me with your ghosts, for choosing me back. He crossed to her, took her hands. Always. They stood there in the library surrounded by books and candlelight and the ghosts of the past that no longer held power over them. No contract this time. Just love. Just choice. Just the beginning. Rosalind woke to sunlight streaming through the library windows. The room had become theirs. She had moved her writing desk to face Dorian's so they could work in the same space. Companionable silence. The kind that only comes after learning each other's rhythms. She stretched, feeling the changes in her body. 3 months of being Dampier had taught her the limits and possibilities of her new nature. She could walk in daylight, could eat human food though she no longer needed it, could feel warmth and cold, though neither affected her the way they once had. She was still becoming. That was the gift of transformation. It never truly ended. Her hand moved to her stomach, resting there gently. Another transformation growing inside her, impossible, the vampire physicians had said. Dampier women could not conceive. Except she had. Rosalind was 2 months pregnant with a child that should not exist. A miracle born from a bond that should not have worked. Dorian appeared in the doorway carrying a tray. Tea. Toast. He set it down and kissed the top of her head. How do you feel, he asked. Alive. Awake, ready. For what? Everything. He smiled and sat across from her. They shared breakfast in comfortable silence as the sun climbed higher. Rosalind looked around the library, at the books that had been Marguerite's, at the desk where Dorian worked, at the flowers on the windowsill, at the life they were building together. She thought about the girl who had stood in her father's garden a year ago, desperate, afraid, out of options. That girl had said yes to a vampire king's impossible condition and found herself transformed into something she had never imagined. Not a victim, not a sacrifice, a queen, a wife, soon a mother. A woman who learned that sometimes the things that terrify us most are the things that save us. Rosalind smiled and reached across the table. Dorian took her hand. The bond hummed between them like music only they could hear. Outside, the garden bloomed. Inside, love grew. And somewhere between the fear and the blood, moons and the morning light, Rosalind Ashcroft had found her home. Not in a place, in a person, in a choice, in forever.